Could the Oklahoma Sooners be planning to honor a legend? Next on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. The show is at Locked On Sooners. And Josh, the Oklahoma Sooners will be welcoming home one of their forgotten sons, prodigal sons, however you want to describe it, in Josh Heupel when the Tennessee Volunteers come to Norman for Oklahoma's first game as SEC members. And according to George Stoia of On3 and SoonerScoop, sounds like the Oklahoma Sooners might have some plans in the work to show some appreciation, affection, love to their national title winning quarterback, Josh Heupel, and former offensive coordinator, obviously.
Yeah, and we wondered if maybe something could be in the works, if you would honor Josh Heupel in some form or fashion. Sounds like, according to George Stoya's reporting, that yes, Oklahoma, in whatever capacity that may be, they're planning on honoring Josh Heupel in some way, shape, or form, which is good, right? I think as a fan, you want to see if the bridge doesn't get totally repaired, you want to see Oklahoma put its best foot forward and just say, look, you won a national championship here and probably should have won a Heisman Trophy as a quarterback here at Oklahoma. And we're rivals. We won't call ourselves enemies, but we're rivals today because you're coaching Tennessee, and into the future looks like you'll be coaching Tennessee, and we're rivals in that regard. But you're a great quarterback, and you're a storied quarterback, the last national championship winning quarterback at Oklahoma. Let's hope that changes in short order. But Oklahoma needs to try and repair this, or at least the fan base needs to put its best foot forward to say, look, even though the offensive coordinator stint didn't go according to plan, really it's worked out for all parties, right? Here you are as a head coach at Tennessee. Things are going well, and you're still beloved here, and that needs to be showcased and highlighted, and he should be celebrated for his time in Norman, to where hopefully any of this bad blood that maybe exists out there because of the way his tenure ended as the offensive coordinator, it's time for all parties to just move on.
Yeah, he was, pretty good as an offensive coordinator for the Sooners. Yeah, things weren't the Sam Bradford level or even Landry Jones level for his entire tenure. But I also don't think he had the quarterback play that we'd kind of come to expect at Oklahoma, either what we saw before he was the offensive coordinator or what we saw after he was the offensive coordinator. I always wonder, and it's kind of the big what if of Oklahoma football. What if Josh Heupel would have gotten to coach Baker Mayfield? What if? What does that look like for the Sooners? And what does that look like for Josh Heupel's trajectory? Does he then become the heir apparent to Bob Stoops? And we're sitting here talking about Josh Heupel in 2023, as opposed to the Lincoln Riley era, now Brent Venables era. Who knows where that would have all gone, how those dominoes would have fallen. That's not to say he was the heir apparent or that Bob Stoops was planning on it, but I could very well have seen a mindset that, hey, if Josh Heupel is good and he's great and he has success as the offensive coordinator here, that Stoops would have very well been, or he would have felt very comfortable handing it over to Heupel, who, again, Heisman Trophy contender, national championship winning quarterback. It just, the things didn't fall right for him at Oklahoma. The timing wasn't necessarily right as well. Blake Bell, Trevor Knight, they were okay. but they weren't good enough for the offense to reach those heights that we'd come to expect at Oklahoma at that point. And I'm with you. And however it all ended, he is an important piece of Oklahoma and played a huge, huge role in Oklahoma's national championship run, even after he got hurt. And he wasn't able to necessarily throw the ball like he had, most of that season. I mean, he was still critical to what Oklahoma became. And I mean, how important we always talk about Baker Mayfield and transferring to Oklahoma at the time that he transferred. What about, Heupel? Heupel is a part of the resurrection of Oklahoma football. And so his legacy will always be attached to, quote unquote, Oklahoma coming back. From the 99 season to 2000 win the national title, really set the stage for Oklahoma's run from 2000 to 2010, where they did reach multiple national title games. They did have, Jason White win the Heisman. They did have Sam Bradford win the Heisman. Adrian Peterson became a national, household name. Does that happen if Josh Heupel doesn't have the success that he has in that 2000 season that really opens the door for, Oklahoma? The offense is electric, explosive. It's what everybody wants to play for because of how successful he and the Oklahoma passing game was in 2000. I mean, it really set the stage for what we see as the expectation now for Oklahoma football. That was the precursor. That was the foundation of it. And so when Heupel comes to town at the beginning of October, or is it the end of September? I can't remember the exact date. That is a huge moment for however his tenure ended. He is a beloved son of Oklahoma football and will be treated as such by Joseph Harraz, Joe Castiglione, Bob Stoops, Brent Venables. I mean, Brent Venables has a tie and a connection to this kid. Even though he wasn't an offensive coach, Brent Venables loves Josh Heupel. He's got an affection and an affinity for him that maybe the previous head coach would not have had. Hence, there not being much of a connection or much of a relationship. But we also know from Lincoln Riley's tenure at Oklahoma, there wasn't much connection or relationship to many former Sooners. And so as Venables has come back, he's rebuilt what Oklahoma's expectation is to their alumni, to their former players, and welcomed people home. And Josh Heupel was kind of like that next domino that needs to fall, and that last guy that needs to come home and be honored and respected for what he accomplished with the Sooners.
The question will be, how do you do this? And when do you do this where you honor Heupel? Because look, he's coming in to beat you, right? I mean, this is a massive game. It's September 21st, by the way, between Oklahoma and Tennessee. And it's
way off.
Well, it's a couple of programs that I don't want to say totally mirror one another, but in some ways have some similarities going into this season with five-star quarterbacks that are young, that each have just made the one respective start in Nico Iamaleava and in Jackson Arnold. And yet they're kind of in that next rung below Georgia, obviously, and maybe even if you really want to say in a third tier or a tier below Alabama and Texas going into next season for some, right? Not that they can't climb those tiers, but this is a massive football game. So the bottom line is it's understandable that Josh Heupel's not going to be going out of his way mid-game to have some type of honoring ceremony or before the game. So I don't know how they're going to do it. That'll be interesting. I don't know if you just put him on the Jumbotron for a moment and then you get a standing ovation and he can wave or whatever. It would be, to me, though, a perfect world. And I don't think this is doable, unfortunately, because, again, he's the head coach of Tennessee and you're playing what, again, is a big-time football game in late September. I really think from a public relations standpoint, it would behoove both Oklahoma and Tennessee and Josh Heupel for Bob Stoops to be a part of this in some way, shape, or form to truly just bury the past, right? Whether or not there's 1,000% truth in that, hey, we're all good and everything's great. I mean, this was your head coach when you won the national championship together. The offensive coordinator stint did not end how anybody wanted it to, but to put that truly behind all of us Bob Stoops would be involved in some way, shape, or form, right? That's the way the OU fan base could truly say, okay, there's no more animosity here. I think. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know that realistically it could.
If we know Bob Stoops like we think we know Bob Stoops, I gotta imagine he's going to be involved somehow. He just doesn't seem like the kind of guy that just lets things linger, and probably didn't feel the greatest about how all that had to go down anyway. I'm sure that was a punch to the gut to have to do what he had to do. It sucked. It was a business decision, not personal, but business decisions become personal when there's relationships attached. But after so many years, it's time. And I've knowing the Oklahoma Athletic Department, I'm sure they'll do a phenomenal job of honoring Heupel in a way that allows him to continue focusing on his job, but also makes sure that he has a moment that shows him the love that he deserves as a former Oklahoma Sooner. A conference that's not getting much love now, well, that's the Big 12, because Oklahoma and Texas are no longer carrying the recruiting flag for the conference. But man, that SEC recruiting is no joke. Let's discuss that coming up here on Locked On Sooners.
Super Bowl 58. We are tick-tocking down, baby. Happy Super Bowl to, I imagine, most everybody watching, listening along to us that celebrate. That's a happy Super Bowl from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like us, let's go, baby. Let's park down on the couch. Let's get those snacks. Let's get to cooking. Let's get to identifying what is the proper parlay, which side of this game are we on. The latest number, by the way, from FanDuel, a couple of them anyways, San Francisco still a favorite. They're going to finish, it looks like, as a favorite at kickoff of this game. 2.5-point number right now in favor of San Francisco. Money line minus 130 for San Francisco, plus 110 for Kansas City. So not quite even right there, but not too awfully far away from it either. The over-under number, 47.5. I like it to stay under that. That's just my thought on it. But FanDuel, so many ways for you to end this season with a W or 2 or 3. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL.
And every recruiting segment here on the Locked On Network is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Josh, Big 12 versus SEC recruiting. There's always been a lot made about the two conferences, and we know Oklahoma and Texas have kind of led the way in recruiting for many, many years. Texas generally having the quote unquote upper hand as it relates to recruiting classes with higher stars, which doesn't always translate to on-field success, as we've seen much over the last decade. Well, now the Oklahoma Sooners are going into the SEC where, hey, you know what? They had the number 8 class. You look at ESPN, you look at 247 Sports, and it's one of the better classes in the country, coming in at number 8, well within the top 10. But that number 8 ranking gets you 5th in the SEC. So no longer does a number 8 ranking mean top 2. No, you're top 5 in your new conference. But it's a conference that, man, is battling on the recruiting trail, because if you look at the top 30 in the nation in 247 Sports team recruiting rankings, 14 of the 16 teams in the SEC come in inside the top 30. For the Big 12, no teams inside the top 20 in recruiting. Texas A&M, a team that had been a recruiting power under Jimbo Fisher, fell back a little bit after the Jimbo Fisher firing, even though Mike Elko is a good coach and was able to still pull in Terry Bussey, the 5-star athlete. They still ended up sitting at number 19 in the team recruiting rankings. So Man, that SEC recruiting is going to be a gauntlet year in, year out. But what we're seeing is that Brent Venables and his staff are up to the task. And we're already seeing a lot of movement and a lot of momentum for the 2025 recruiting cycle as well. But man, they're right there. They're right there in the thick. They've got some more work to do to catch Georgia, catch Alabama. But with wins and hopefully national titles, that'll start to even out a little bit. But man, they're kind of on the cusp.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The difference in the wild difference between the SEC and the Big 12 in terms of the team recruiting rankings across the board. Texas Tech, you mentioned it, nobody from the Big 12 inside the top 20 per the 24/7 Sports team recruiting rankings. Texas Tech was the highest ranked team in the recruiting rankings, number 24. Then you got to go on down the board a little ways before you get to TCU at 34th. Kind of interesting from the Big 12 perspective that UCF is right there in third at 35th. I don't know, without diving into what the last, 8 or whatever years have looked like for them. I'm imagining that's on the uptick for them. So that's sort of intriguing as we start projecting the future potentially of the Big 12. Maybe, and we've thought perhaps UCF could be that team that winds up sort of moving toward the top of the pecking order as that goes along. But as it pertains to things for Oklahoma, I guess the question again is Oklahoma going to sink or swim in the SEC with this confidence that no, you're not playing every single team every single week, right? I mean, there are breathers in there every now and again, and you got to take advantage of them when you get them. But look, man, I mean, you're playing a lot of these teams, basically everybody but Georgia you're playing this year that's toward the top of the board in these recruiting rankings out of the SEC for Oklahoma. So Oklahoma gets tossed into the fire. And again, how will they handle that on a week-to-week basis is going to be really interesting to watch play out. I've long been a proponent, John, that the Sooners will rise to the occasion, but I don't really have anything, I guess, fundamental to stand on outside of the belief that historically Oklahoma is a power in college football. And generally speaking, Oklahoma doesn't they don't stay down, right? They win big football games, they win championships, and they do that everywhere I think that that they go. So I expect that from Oklahoma, but we're going to see how this all plays out. And if seeing that type of talent again and again and again, week after week, or for the most part, week after week, if it takes its toll on Oklahoma, because frankly, you can make the argument that at times Oklahoma, and especially, of course, the last couple of seasons, as Venables has tried to get this thing rolling again, Oklahoma was underwhelming in a lot of ways in the Big 12, even as it was winning Big 12 championships relative to maybe what it's going to take to win 10 games, 11 games on a year in, year out basis in the SEC. You won those games in the Big 12, but man, it took high flying offenses and it wasn't always dominant fashion for Oklahoma. So what does that mean when you translate over? You can understand the argument that somebody makes that Oklahoma's going to take a bump or a bruise or 2 or 3 or however many you want to say.
Yeah. And, I think still having that proximity to Texas is going to help them in recruiting. And what Brent Venables and his staff are doing defensively is what we hadn't seen for much of the last decade. We hadn't seen them pull 5 stars in on the defensive side of the football. Very rare, very with much frequency is a better way to put that. But in the last 3 cycles, you have 3 5-star players so far. And then you're trending in a very, very positive direction for a 4th 5-star defender in the 2025 cycle. So that starts to snowball a little bit and you start to continue to add top tier talent. And it goes beyond even those guys, but being able to find really, really talented 4-star players like a Danny Okoye or a Jaden Jackson, or, I'm still a big Robert Spears Jennings fan. I think he's about to have a breakout season, and that's a dude from the 2022 class. You go back to the 2023 cycle. I mean, there's so many guys that have yet to break out that are a part of these, top 8, top 5 classes. We're still kind of watching their development and waiting for those breakout season. A Nick Anderson, after 1 year, everybody's like, whoa, what's up with Nick Anderson? Well, he was injured, and then he had a huge season. So like everything is kind of coming together for these guys in these recruiting classes they're evaluating very well. Now it's a matter of just continuing to build that depth that's no longer a Lincoln Riley team, and it's all Brent Venables guys. And I have a lot of faith that it's going to come together, and it's going to come together with a lot of success. One team we don't have to worry about having a lot of success, well, that's the Oklahoma Sooners softball team. But will their success in 2024 lead to a 4th straight national title? Let's discuss coming up here on Locked On Sooners. If you were in Vegas and you had $100 extra in your pocket, what would you do with it? Would you hit the slots? Would you go play a little roulette? Always bet on black, as Wesley Snipes said in Passenger 57, or you hit the poker tables. Well, hey, if you're looking for last minute tickets to the big game, go to Game Time. They've got great seats available, and they have options for you for the big game. Use Vegas 100 as your promo code to get $100 off and put a little extra money in your pocket for the trip. Hey, you're not going to Vegas, not going to watch the big game. You're just looking for great tickets around town. Well, Game Time has got you covered with some of the best last minute deals, the best prices guaranteed over at Game Time. Go download the app. Again, it gives you a great picture of what you're going to be looking at from the arena, from the field, and you don't have to guess. There's no guessing with Game Time. You can see exactly what your seat's going to be looking at. And again, the best prices guaranteed. Go to Game Time, download the app in your app store. You can use Vegas 100 for $100 off a big game ticket, or use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed over at Game Time. The Oklahoma Sooners softball team opens the season this weekend in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, for 4 games where they'll take on Utah Valley, Duke, Washington, and Long Beach State. So it's a very interesting mix of teams here. 2 teams in Utah Valley and Long Beach State that you should win those games. I mean, obviously your Oklahoma should win all the games, but you will certainly be challenged by a good Duke team who Alex Tarraco mentioned is the team that she's going to be watching whenever she was with us on our show yesterday, kind of getting us ready for the 2024 softball season. If you haven't checked that out, please go back and watch that. That's a fantastic just primer for what we're going to be looking at with the Sooners this year. She'll be with us every single week throughout the softball season. So make sure you're subscribed here on Locked On Sooners. But a Washington team that's also going to be very, very good with Bailey Klingler coming back as well. So this is a very interesting weekend for the Sooners that'll provide them some good tests right out the gate.
It does. Yeah. I mean, you get the, not catch our breath, but get our sea legs under us game, right? Out of the shoot here with Utah Valley. And then you get after it later in the afternoon versus Duke, and should be a great test. Washington on Friday night at 8:30 will be a really good Central Time. So we'll see what this Oklahoma team, I think we know what this Oklahoma team is made of. And listening to Patty Gasso and listening to Jada Coleman and Brito as this season arrives, they understand. They've got the long winning streak. They're going for something that's never been done, and they embrace that. They want that, John. They want to be a part of this thing that you immortalize yourself with. They're already basically immortalized, this group, the 5 seniors that there's 10 upperclassmen, 5 seniors for Oklahoma that will have gone the duration of their careers with Oklahoma, the T.R.A. Jennings, the Jada Colemans, and others of the world. That group, yeah, I got it. They're immortalized, build the statue, put up the mural, whatever you want to say, right? They are those superstar figures. But look, somebody can only match you if you go win 4 national championships in 4 years. It's not that it can't be done again. It technically could, and maybe OU will do it again at some point, but nobody's winning 5, right? You can't do that. So this is something that truly would immortalize them in the history of the sport, and obviously at Oklahoma.
Yeah, 4 straight national titles has never been done, and that's what this team is setting out to do. Whether they'll talk about it or not, it's going to be the talk of town for the next 3-4 months as Oklahoma goes on this run. I'm really, really excited to see how this team has grown over the offseason. We already knew Jada Coleman was one of the best leadoff hitters in all of college softball going into 2023. And what did she do? Well, she had a breakout year from a power perspective, setting career highs in home runs and RBIs. And then, we saw Kinsey Hansen bounce back from the injuries that kind of plagued her in 2022, had a huge year in 2023. Alyssa Brito, same. She emerged to tie for the team lead in home runs and was a great run producer as well. And so if I'm looking at a player that might have like a Kinsey Hansen bounce back, Sydney Sanders, she was a 20 home run gal at Arizona State as a true freshman. Took a while to get going with Oklahoma last year, but in conference play was pretty good. And I don't know if it was just the new environment, the adjusting to the new way of doing things. As Alex mentioned on the show, she had to make adjustments to how, Jennifer Rocha scouted and prepared. And I'm sure Sydney Sanders had to go through something similar with JT Gasso, where it was, oh my gosh, this is a whole new way of looking at things and preparation. So I'm really excited to see what Sydney Sanders is able to do in her second year with the Sooners. How they shake out second base. I mean, you've got some really, really intriguing options there. And then, man, the freshman class, who's going to step up and be a big time part of this roster? That's a fascinating question to follow throughout the year. I don't know if we'll have a definitive answer early on, but I do think by the end of the season, or at least in conference play, one of those freshmen will have been a big, or have become a big time part of the lineup. And then, man, it's going to be so fun to watch Kelly Maxwell in a Sooner uniform, a girl who is obviously so good with Oklahoma State, now gets the benefit of Jennifer Rocha and one of the best defensive teams in all of softball playing behind her as well, with the best offense in college softball, giving her run support.
I think Ella Parker is definitely going to impact things for Oklahoma. She's too good, I think, to keep out of the lineup for OU as a freshman. Cassidy Pickering is someone I think that has a good chance to factor in. Unfortunately, there will be a red shirt for Nellie McEnroe Marina. She had an injury, Patty Gasso explained the other day. But other than that, listening to Coach Gasso, John, they're thinking that this is Coach Gasso's words, we need all six, talking about the pitchers. Now, whether or not that is indeed true, that's the plan going in, and they feel like they need everybody else on the roster that is healthy as well. So there's going to be a number of different arms we can see in the circle. The way Coach Gasso was talking to was Oklahoma legitimately might have its starter, its middle reliever, and then a closer. That could be a legitimate approach that Oklahoma takes on a regular basis this season, which would be, again, a departure. And we've seen that a little bit last year from Oklahoma, but just in terms of the history of the sport of softball, that's a big time departure from how softball was coached and really was played for years and years and years. But that's what Oklahoma has at its disposal, and they're going to take advantage of it to stay fresh when obviously the money games, the most important games of them all, come around, which is obviously the path to the Women's College World Series and trying to win another national championship.
And when you're the best in the sport, you have the cachet to go and innovate the sport a little bit. And I think it's good. Yes, can softball pitchers throw a bunch of innings? Absolutely they can. But is it good for them long term, especially as velocities improve and the torque on the elbow, requires so much more to throw those pitches? It's kind of a nice move into the player protection aspect of it and the keeping players fresh and healthy. But it's going to be interesting strategically just to watch how they manage the staff. Is it, May and Maxwell and Keeney that are your starters with a couple people as your middle relievers, quote unquote, and maybe it's Kirsten Deal in the closing role, or how do they go about that? Peyton Monticelli, is she going to have that kind of relief role because of her ability with power? Are they going to be able to, start off with somebody who might be a little bit more finesse and then bring in a power pitcher and balance it that way. So there's just so many fun things to watch with this team as we go into 2024, and they're going to be the favorites until somebody steps up and knocks them off. And even then, if they lose a game, they're still going to be the favorites. And I don't anticipate that they're going to go undefeated. And I don't know even how long that this streak will hold up. But what I do know is they're going to be they're going to be the team to beat. And they're going to be a team that continues to put out incredible offensive numbers, and they're going to have clutch pitching all year long. Final thoughts on softball before we get out of here, Josh?
Yeah, I just can't wait to see how Coach Gasso employs all of these puzzle pieces. That's fascinating to watch this. There's so many options at her disposal. So getting to come back here and next week with Alex Storako and probably you and I together beforehand, breaking down how Oklahoma initially went about its business this weekend, I think is going to be very interesting. There's just, I don't know that we're going to see this really set in stone for a while, or maybe at all for Oklahoma over the course of this season, at least from a lineup and pinch hitting and pinch running perspective. I think you're going to see a lot of faces for the most part all season long. The circle, okay, maybe you get to a point where it's a lot of Maxwell, a lot of Nicole May, a lot of Keeney. I could see that developing, but in terms of the lineup, oh my goodness, I think there's so many options there.
There are a lot of options. It's a talented roster, top to bottom, and it's going to be exciting to watch. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all platforms and on YouTube. Also hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef. Again, myself at John9Williams. Follow our friend of the show, Alex Storako, at Alex Storako, and be here each week to see what she has to say about Oklahoma's weekend that was, and gets us ready for each week of Oklahoma softball throughout the season here on Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.